guys did a princess sloper, a dart sloper, some
Say it again.
variation of that when you took cluster
Princess
tech. Yes.
Seam!
What?
Wait, what was that? We're doing a good candid video moment.
But
Yeah.
oh yeah.
We have to say princess seam so we know that that's what this is.
So, I want you to flash back to about a week ago. We were talking about individual planes when you had your double dart sloper, one here and one here. And we were talking about how if you had a single dart, that essentially separated the body into either 2 or 3 planes, depending upon how you were counting, right? 1, 2, right there. If you had a double dart, you were separating it into, at minimum, 3 planes. 1, 2, 3, right? So, one of the things we talked about was, ultimately, the more planes you can break the garment into, the better of a fit you can get, right? You know, take a look at how good the fit is of anything that we are currently wearing. They're all made of 2 pieces, they're single planes. So there's very little shaping, and so that's why everything's sort of boxy and generic. Now we've continued that idea by breaking apart the planes in slightly different ways. You can see before you had 2 darts, now you got 3 darts. You got 3 darts. Even though we're not using them as darts, you still have 3 darts. Are you getting a better fit than you were before? Absolutely. So it's a good proof to our theory that the more darts, the more style lines you can introduce, the more planes that you can get, and therefore the better contouring you can get. You've heard the term princess seam, I'm presuming, at some point besides costume tech. Kristen's never heard it before. Princess seam is something that's really, really common across fashion. And I this time I'm using that word pretty broadly because I'm not just talking about stuff that you buy at Macy's or at Forever 21. I'm talking about historically as well. Princess seams are very, very popular. What is a princess seam? So first of all, what's a seam? What's the difference between a dart and a seam?
The seam is where 2 pieces of fabric come together.
Exactly. Here we've got a single piece of fabric where some excess has been removed. In a seam, there are 2 pieces, 2 completely separate entities that are being joined together. A princess seam is placed very, very specifically on the body. If you think back to your very first draping with your 2 darts, you had 1 dart that went here and 1 dart that went here, right? And so essentially, shoot, I shouldn't have gotten rid of that piece of paper.
Everyone said again, what is it?
It's a princess seam!
Thank you.
You had, your original draping looked something like this. Correct? Looks familiar? So what happens if we just connect the dots there and chop the draping apart? What did we just get?
Princess seam.
We just got a seam that happens to be in the princess seam placement. What makes this a princess seam? What makes it in the princess seam placement?
Is it over the bust?
There you go. Whatever that apex is, in this particular instance, it's the bust point. It travels across that. Where traditionally the princess seam begins in the waist and ends someplace up in here. If you take a look at the dress forms, look at what they've used to be able to create the covering of the form. What's that right there? A princess seam that runs from the shoulder to the waist. On the back, we don't have the bust point for it to run over, so where does it run over on the back? The shoulder blade, exactly. Does the princess seam have to start at the shoulder? No. And if you spend, this would be the perfect class period to have a bridal magazine, because both bridesmaids dresses and wedding dresses are based 99% of the time, prom dresses, any kind of formal dresses, choir dresses, are all based on the princess seam type of style lines. As we just noticed, they can originate at the shoulder, go across the bust point, and go to the waist. Do they have to? No. They can, a lot of, the other frequent place that you see it is high on the armhole, so it does something like that, or low on the armhole, so it does something like that.
Could you have it on a strapless as well?
Can you have it on a strapless? Absolutely. It'd probably be shorter, but you'd still get the same kind of contour. Now, those three placements, here, here, or here, tend to be culturally what we see most frequently. But if you understand the notion that a princess seam just has to run across the bust point, does it have to originate here or here? Could it originate there and do that? Each of the ones I've indicated come to the center of the waist. Could it do this? Could it do this? Sure as shit. It can go wherever it wants. Could it do this? It could. I'm not sure that you would technically call that a princess seam because it doesn't really approach here, but it's serving the same purpose. What do each of those things represent? What they represent is that this dart has been moved to there, or to there, or to there. It's the same thing of dart manipulation. The only difference is there's another way to do it besides doing it in brown paper. Take a look. There's one other thing I want you to notice here. There's my grain placement on my original 2-dart draping. If my grain is right here on the center front, what does that mean about the grain over here? Where's the grain automatically have to run over here?
The same.
It has to be parallel to that, right? Glad I grabbed a piece of paper I can see through. So it's something like that, right? And so you could technically take that pattern, transfer a grain line onto the other side of it, and then chop it apart. And you would suddenly have a princess seam pattern. So guess what you're going to do for your next project?
We're gonna make a princess seam.
You're all going to be princesses. Brenda will be the queen mother. And I will be Dame Edna, drunk. You're going to take these off the dress form. You are going to establish your princess seam style lines, and you're going to drape, pin baste, and pattern a princess seam sloper. In order to do that, your very first step, may I take this off the floor?
Oh, take it. Burn it.
Don't you mean
You're
drape,
very-
pattern, and pin based?
Say again?
No, wait.
We'll hold that question until we get to the actual homework discussion.
Okay.
Let's talk about the process for a minute. Because part of what I want you to see here is, even though you're doing a new project, there's almost no new information to it. It's just a reuse of the exact same stuff. So, the very first thing you're going to do, I said, is establish a style line. What do I mean by that? Establish your princess seam. What do I mean by that?
You're gonna find where your seam will run.
You're going to make an arbitrary decision of where your seam will run. For my purposes, I want to do something weird. So I'm not going to follow the traditional placement, and I'm going to do something like.
This is the beginner construction project.
In order to establish my style line, or in order to be able to drape, the first thing I've got to do is establish my style lines on the dress form. You don't see a lot of this around the room at the moment, but if Brenda were working on, if Brenda had draped something, you would see that she's got forms that have style lines all over it. So I'm going to take this ribbon. I pulled this ribbon out of drawer C1. What does it say there?
It says
4 style lines. It's all sorts of ribbon and crap that's there. So I'm going to make mine start right here. I'm going to take it directly to the bust point. I'm gonna do that. Once I've got those 3 pins in, I can put in additional pins to be able to hold the new style line to the dress form. The good news is, for the purposes of our project, I need to double check the homework. I'm not sure whether you're doing fronts and backs. But if you're only doing a front, that's the only style line you have to put in place. You already have this style line in place. This, that, and that are all already there. Yes, ma'am.
In case we're doing backs, can you show us where the shoulder blade would be found on our dress form?
Well, take a look. Look at it in profile. Can you see where the part that sticks out the furthest is? Some place in this region. The good news about the back is it doesn't have to be anywhere near as specific as the front, unless you're a hunchback.
Nice.
And so you have a lot more. You have a lot more room to be creative back here about where it goes. I mean, it could go like that. So I want you to think back to your draping process. What was the very first step you did after you established how big of a piece of muslin you needed?
Your straight grain.
What about your straight grain?
We put the fabric on the dress form.
There's one other step you did before that that's super important. I've got a chunk of muslin, I know that it's large enough. What's my next step?
Straight grain, cross grain.
Mark the straight
Mark
grain
it,
and the
right,
cross
okay.
grain on the muslin first. Then, as Kristen said, what am I going to do? Lay the straight grain in along the dress form's center front. After I've got my straight grain pinned in place, what's my next step?